Hello, welcome back to Dish Shelved with Adam White. Today we're going to be talking about Suicide Squad. This is the 1986 version of the Suicide Squad. There's been numerous versions lately in the last 20 years that aren't this one. This is the original setup by John Ostrander and the artists Luke McDonnell and Jeff Isherwood. There was you can get the whole collection of the series in trade paperback form now. There's 8 volumes: Trial by Fire, which is this one, Nightshade Odyssey, Rogues, The Janus Directive, Apocalypse Now, The Phoenix Gambit, The Dragon's Horde, and The Final Mission. As an aside, you can also get the Deadshot trade paperback. It's of a mini series that was done to find out why Deadshot is the way he is, which is he's always looking. He just doesn't care if he dies, and you kind of find out in this Deadshot mini series why he is the way he is. So I highly recommend that one too. A little bit of a story behind this. When DC was doing their Crisis on Infinite Earths, trying to get that lined up here so you can still see it. When DC was doing Crisis on Infinite Earths and joining all their different timelines into one, DC talked to John Ostrander about doing a new book, and they batted around a couple of old titles that hadn't been used for a while, and there was one that was a war book called The Suicide Squad. And John Ostrander was like, well, why would anyone want to be on something called The Suicide Squad? And he said he went home and he thought about it, and he thought, well, who would be on a Suicide Squad? And he said, well, somebody that had no other option. I said, so what about criminals? Maybe they'd have no other option than be on this. And better than that, super criminals. And he said, you know, what if super criminals had the option to join this Suicide Squad and get some time taken off of their sentences, or be released completely, and if they succeed in their mission. And they all got, well, now famously the chips are in their head to make them blow their heads off if they try to leave the mission. But originally, I believe in these they had a wrist band that did that would blow them up if they left their duty while they were with the Suicide Squad. So he thought about that, and he thought, you know, that'd be a really good thing. Let me find some villains that I can use. And so he gathered an assortment of villains, including most famously Deadshot and Captain Boomerang. And the whole thing was headed up by Amanda Waller, who was a really unique character. She was just a human, and she was just tough as anyone you would find. And she'd do anything to get the job done. And she was in charge of this Suicide Squad, and she made sure everything worked and everyone stayed in line. In Trial by Fire, which is this edition, the first volume, the Suicide Squad fights jihadist terrorists. In that sense, they're really ahead of their time because of all the problems you have now with jihadist terrorists in the world. And they fought them. And of course, these were supervillain jihadist terrorists. But the idea was still there that this was a big threat to the United States. And they did it as they were going to attack an airport. And so, I mean, it was really prescient in a lot of ways as to some of the stuff we've actually come across in the last 20 years. And John Ostrander was on top of that. The character arcs, especially Deadshot, Captain Boomerang, and Amanda Waller that I mentioned before, they grow and change as this series progresses. Maybe not so much Captain Boomerang, but he's got a really good character story to him. And it's funny because he's always trying to get out of doing the jobs without getting blown up or not getting his sentence reduced and being released. And he really is a funny character, and he was one that DC told him, yeah, use Captain Boomerang. And Ostrander was hesitant to use him at first, but then he really got to thinking about it, and he thought, you know, I could have a lot of fun with this character. So he did that. Now, Deadshot's my favorite character in this. He's an assassin. He very famously does not care if he lives or dies. Again, if you get the miniseries, I have it on Kindle. You can get it for pretty cheap on Kindle. And I have all the volumes of this in trade paperback, except number 8, which came out on Kindle when it came out. So I got it on Kindle for like $5. So you might want to check all these on Kindle because they might be cheaper than the trade paperbacks now. Also, some other characters were Rick Flag and Nightshade and Count Vertigo. Vertigo had some mental issues, and he also had kind of a death wish, and had an ongoing bet with Deadshot that if he decided he wanted to die, he wanted Deadshot to kill him because he didn't want to commit suicide, even though it would still essentially amount to that. But so that kind of plays out over the course of half the series, and the series ends up with something with a resolution to that, and it's a really effective way to end the series too. It gives you a sense of what make bad guys tick. You really get an inside look at the supervillains, because normally supervillains you just get as the villains of a book, and you don't really see why they're doing what they're doing. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And you really don't get their side of the story. Suicide Squad gave you their side of the story. And it was really effective in letting you know what was going on inside these supervillains' minds, why they did what they did, what they do to get out of it. You know, could they function on the missions and get the job done? Would they do the right thing? You really got a lot of that in here, and it was really nice to see that. Did they do it selfishly, like Captain Boomerang, who's just trying to get out of a prison sentence? Or do they do it because they like being heroes? Nightshade ends up being more of a hero in the series than a villain, and it's because she likes doing the right thing. And it's you see a lot of that between all the different villains that are in this series as to who does what, and why they're doing it. You also have a few heroes in this. Rick Flag was a hero. He was from a military family. I believe it was his grandfather, maybe, was part of the original Suicide Squad. That's the one that I haven't read. I've got it, but I haven't read it yet. The one that takes place in I think it was World War II. Also, the Bronze Tiger and Vixen are two heroes that that are in this story throughout most of it, and they're doing it to help out because they are heroes, and they don't have, uh, they don't get the risk things that blow them up or anything like that. They just are part of it voluntarily because they know these are the dirty jobs that no superhero wants to do, and they know they need done. So they take place in these Suicide Squad missions, and they kind of ride herd on the villains and keep them in line. Uh, they're at odds with superheroes like Batman and Superman. You see that. Um, Batman especially doesn't like what they're doing, but Waller stands up to him, and most people don't stand up to Batman, so you get to see that side of her. She really is a tough lady. Uh, it also famously introduced Barbara Gordon as Oracle. Barbara Gordon, of course, was the original Batgirl. She was shot by the Joker and paralyzed from the waist down, and John Ostrander turned her into Oracle, who was a computer expert that could dig into any computer stuff. And again, this was pre-internet, or early internet, and she really, again, was ahead of her time on this when he made Oracle. And he showed that she was an even better hero paralyzed than she was as Batgirl. Uh, Really good story. She ended up in a book, Birds of Prey, later, and she became the kind of the touchstone for all the Batman characters, and they'd all have their earpieces with Oracle telling them what to do and where to go, and she became just a really fascinating hero. And it showed that even though she had been paralyzed, that she was really on top of things and a really good hero, and it gave some equal time to people with disabilities. Um, the series is just lots of fun. There's one time where Rick Flag is going to kill a senator because of him going to out the Suicide Squad, and they send Deadshot to stop him from killing him. And I won't tell you how he does it, but it's extremely funny, and it's just typical Deadshot. Uh, and that's a really funny story in it. Boomerang, Captain Boomerang, and all his schemes to try to get out of doing the work but still get out of prison. He dresses up as other costume criminals to commit crimes, and um, he's a really funny character. And Amanda Waller, like I said, she's got a willingness to do anything to get out of the situations that they get into. She's very tough, and even though she's just human and doesn't have any superhuman abilities, she's just as tough as the ones that do have super abilities. I would be remiss to do this without mentioning The Suicide Squad movie. It just came out in 2021. Don't confuse it with the 2016 version, which was not good at all. I don't know what they were thinking with that one, but the new one, starring Idris Elba and John Cena, very good movie. It's very bloody. It's not for kids. The comic can be for kids, but the movie's definitely not for kids. But it's extremely funny. It's the most fun I've had watching a movie in a long time, in years. And during its initial run, I watched it 8 times, which I know is excessive, but I really enjoyed it that much. Um, it's the movie even had the support staff. They looked like the support staff in the original Suicide Squad, the people that ran the computers and ran the missions from a center at the Belle Reve prison where they did it. the characters were named as same as those characters, and they looked like those characters. I mean, that is the kind of attention to detail they put in that Suicide Squad movie, and it worked very well. You really got a good sense of the characters, and it had the same sense of fun that this had. Um, Even the songs in it are help the character arcs, that they've just selected these songs that just help along the character arcs in the story. And it's a really fun movie. Again, it's bloody, and normally I don't like that kind of stuff, but I made an exception for this because it was a really good movie. And all the characters are great. But most important thing is Suicide Squad, the original 1986 series. Like I said, there's been a couple. There was a new 52 version, which was okay. And there was a DC Rebirth version, which was pretty good too. They mostly revolve around Harley Quinn. This was before Harley Quinn existed. But the original Suicide Squad, again, there's 8 volumes. I highly, highly recommend these books. They're very good, and you should check them out. If you like comics or if you like any kind of action stories, these will work well for you. So that's me from the heap this week, and I hope to see you next time. Have a good week.